Thank you for being with us tonight. This meeting has been brought to you in part by
Let Grand Forks International Airport help you start your next vacation off on the right foot. Grand Forks International Airport offers flights to the sunny destinations of Orlando, Las Vegas, and Phoenix on Allegiant, and connections anywhere in the world through Minneapolis-St. Paul on Delta. Forget the hassle of long drives, parking nightmares, and stressful check-ins. The convenience of flying locally means less headaches and more time for you. Grand Forks International Airport, your airport, simply grand.
Know what's in this box? Well, in case your crystal ball is broken, here's a hint. Safe, reliable energy, for starters, but there's also a commitment to this community. See, at Xcel Energy, this is our hometown. So we're not just about making a living here, we're about living here. Oh, I wish I had wings.
In our community, we're always delivering. Xcel Energy, responsible by nature.
Grand Forks. On Saturday, August 17th, feel the thrill of WWE Live with the Universal Champion.
The age of Rollins is here, and we are going to burn it down!
See Seth Rollins collide with Baron Corbin for the Universal Championship, plus Braun Strowman battles Bobby Lashley one-on-one. It's WWE Live at Grand Forks on Saturday, August 17th. Tickets are available.
Good evening. This is the time and place for the Grand Forks City Council Committee of the Whole. Item number 1.1, welcome and roll call.
Weigel? Here. Doctor? Here. Weber?
Here.
Mock?
Here.
Mock is here?
Yep. Marshall? Here. Sandy? Bean? We have a quorum.
Very good, thank you. Item 2.1, Downtown Development Association commingling DDA Street Fair on September 23rd through 25th, 2019. And staff on that one? Very good. Mr. Hager, please. Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Weber, council members, I'm pinch hitting here for Ms. Simeone, who is running the special events permit application process. I'm here just to testify that it is going through the special events permit process, where we're checking all of our departments, making sure that we're getting a good scrub of events as we usually do. My second job is to introduce Mr. Blue Weber of the Downtown Development Association, who will walk you through the event, as there have been some changes and some requests for this year. Mr. Weber.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Hager. Mr. Weber.
Councilman Weber, members of Committee of the Whole. Here to talk about Street Fair, if you guys are all familiar with it. One of the more family-friendly events in town. We really focus on a lot of vendors and a lot of fun, but we tried to make this not heavily focused on alcohol. So one of the things that we're doing is pulling this back and just having two of the beer vendors, so local craft beer at these events. We're asking for timeframes on both Friday and Saturday. Friday, we will actually be stopping the alcohol an hour before the event gets done, because we'll be showing a movie at the Lions Auto Cove. And so we don't want to be sending out alcohol throughout the entire thing, but kind of slow it down as the night winds down. One amendment that we will be doing is, if you look at the map that has the different vendors who are located on there, we will be increasing our fencing after talking with the police department. So we'll actually only have 4 entrances and any of the alleyways, and we'll increase the fencing on those to make sure that our volunteers are standing around at those entrance exits. So that way there's only 4 entrance exit points. Any questions I can answer as far as the 2 days?
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Weber. Chief Nelson, anything to add on this, or are we good? We're good. Very good. Any questions, comments?
Just a question. Last year, I don't think there were any beer vendors at this event. Is that correct?
We did have beer vendors, but we held it just in Town Square. And one of the plans this year was to be on 3rd, Kitson, and 4th. And due to some construction changes, we actually had to change our layout. So that's why we pulled it over here. And we've combined it with both Farmers Market during the morning, and then it rolls over to the Hugo's Concert Series with Eric Pasley.
Okay, and so the vendors are going to be at 2 locations?
Yep, so on either side of basically our food court. And then we'll have the beer vendors mixed in with the food vendors. So that way we don't have long lines waiting for the beer outside or around the other vendors. So those vendors are still the showcase.
And you've reduced the entrances and exits to?
Just the 4. Yep, so we have the one at 2nd Avenue and 3rd Street, the one at University and 4th, the one at 1st Avenue and 4th, and then the one basically so people can come in through the alleyway behind Central.
And how will those be monitored?
So we have about 20 volunteers, and then we'll also have 4 police officers present. And then we also work with ProDog Security to have them there.
Okay. Thank you.
So just to dovetail off of Ms. Marshall's statement, so people will be standing at the 4 entry points the entire time that alcohol
Yep,
is being
yeah, so
sold?
we will have our volunteers there the whole time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Will there be a band or something issued, or will they just be checking IDs?
So at the bars, they will be checking IDs.
Oh, the way they always do.
Yep, so that way it's the liability is really on them.
Very good. Mr. Weigel, we have a motion for approval. Looking for the possibility of a second on the motion.
I'll second to get the vote on here.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Swanson.
Councilman Weber and members of the Committee of the Whole, I'm Debbie Swanson with the Grand Forks Public Health Department. Just a point of clarification on the application, it says a noise variance. And if the event is held from 5 to 10 and 2 to 8, a noise variance is not needed for those specific hours. If it extends beyond that, then yes, it would be. 10 p.m. is the requirement. So I don't know if you want to ask the organizers for clarification on that. If you are not approving a noise variance, you are basically approving the sale of alcohol in the venue where children are present under the Class 11 liquor license. And as a health department professional, we really are trying very hard to portray a message of prevention around alcohol and other substances through the work that we're doing with our prevention grants. And I just want you to be aware that exposure to consumption of alcohol as well as the sale of it is a known predictive factor for youth experimenting and adults binge drinking. So I just wanted to bring that issue forward before the council as you consider many of these permits. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swanson. Ms.
Mr.
Marshall.
Weber, if I could comment again, I share those concerns in serving on the call to action and the concerns that we've talked about. It seems like we're doing more and more, or considering more and more requests for alcohol permits and commingling. I'm more comfortable when they're in a more confined space. And when, this is a fairly large area throughout downtown with more entrances than we've had at other kinds of events. This one raised more concern for me. And I don't know that there's a question embedded in that, just a comment.
Very good. Mr. Weber, last year we had the same street fair, and there was beer sold.
Yeah, and there was beer and liquor sold at that one, and we wanted to pull this back and have it be about local craft, and so that was one of the intentions, was to go with 2 local craft vendors.
And is there a precedent anywhere for the type of commingling that you're doing?
Yeah, so 3 years ago at Alley Alive held in downtown, we had it behind Brick and Barley, and we had both Rhombus and Half Brothers at that. And the idea was to create this sense of an event that isn't focused around the alcohol but has alcohol present. So pulling away from the idea of a beer garden where we're really just wrangling everybody who's drinking into one area and kind of over-consuming and kind of taking that focus away from it and making it more about the vendors and more about the families who are able to walk around the whole thing.
And one other question, if I may. So we're just talking about craft beers that are made locally by our local vendors, our local breweries. We're not talking about hard alcohol or anything of that nature. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
I'll just add
Mr.
one
Weigel,
thing.
please.
Ms. Swanson, you talked about prevention. Do you guys do any work with
teaching about the responsibility or consuming alcohol responsibly instead of just, saying, no, don't do it. 'Cause I think that's important as well as we educate community members, we educate parents, we educate college students, whoever it might be. I think that's probably just as important, if not maybe more important.
Councilman Weber, members of the Committee of the Whole, and Councilman Weigel. Yes, indeed, we have several prevention messages. One of them that you might be familiar with is called the Speaks Volumes, and it's really educating people about the amount of alcohol that's in any given drink, and it's targeted to people who are of legal age, and so ensuring that they're aware of how much they are consuming. That's one of our many prevention messages. In events such as this, we're really focused on the fact that we're encouraging families to come downtown and take part of the beauty of our downtown and having family-friendly activities, and yet alcohol is served not in a specific place, which would be available in bars and restaurants, but throughout the venue, which exposes youth to a social norm that we can't have an event without its presence. So that's another one of our messages, among many others. And it's not the only work that we do. We also are involved in the treatment aspect too. So we see, as a health department, we work in all areas. And so it's just something that's become, I think, a little bit more evident to our local coalitions that there's more and more permits coming forward with this particular request for commingling, which I don't find defined anywhere in city language other than on the permits. So I just wanted to bring that issue forward. It's been something I've thought about for a long time. My colleagues ask me about it frequently, and I decided that given this event was so family-focused, it was the time to bring that message forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swanson. If I could ask, I've heard a couple of times now that we are hearing more and more requests for this. This is, it seems, a request that we've heard before for this event, so this isn't a new event. But actually, the way the event is treating this is different. Can you give us a quick history of, I believe that going back a few years, we used a beer garden. And then we had a form of commingling, and now this is a slightly different form of commingling. Can you help us to understand what this looks like?
Yeah, so since this one is a fair, a street fair, this one does have a little bit different of a feel than our concerts that are downtown. So Hugo's Concert Series is another commingling event where you pay to come in, but it still has a fenced-in feel, and it still does have it in one little tiny block. So the idea behind this is to take it away from that focus of so much on the consumption and more on the vendors and the people who are creating things. And so we bring in a lot more activities. So as for example, this year we're doing Jurassic Park. So we'll be showing Jurassic Park across the street. We also have mini golf. We have a chess set that we've created. We have a number of games that families can play and basically have activities all the way throughout, as well as an entire kids area. So that kids area is inflatables and tons of fun things for kids to do, because the intention is not to just have this only be about kids and not to just have this only be about alcohol, but enable everybody to come down and have fun, and be that parents who want to simply have a craft beer while they're walking around looking at vendors.
Let me change my question a little bit.
Yeah.
So years ago with the beer garden, if I wanted to purchase a beer, I went into a concentrated area, roped off. I showed my ID, I went in, and I bought and consumed a beer in that area. Recent years, I've been able to purchase the beer and walk around with it, an outside vendor. And this year, how is that going to be different, and what does it look like for people consuming beer? Is there a specific cup, or
so you've
whatever
already,
you want to tell us there?
You've already approved of this commingling that we're asking for tonight in Alley Alive. For 4 years, we did this exact commingling where we just had our beer vendor set up as another vendor. The intention was not to have it be as heavily focused on them being separated into a separate area, but have them be one of the other vendors. And so this is actually something that has been approved in the past.
I'm sorry, one more question. So right now, if this is approved, how does an individual purchase a beer? What does that process look like? Where do they purchase it? Where do they consume it?
So Rhombus and Half Brothers will both be located in with the food vendors in the food court area.
breweries.
Two local
okay.
breweries. And then they will just go up, they'll have to show their ID, and they will be able to purchase a can of beer only served in those cans.
Oh, so people will be consuming directly out of a can?
Mhm.
And do they go into these locations?
Nope, those locations will have their own booths at the food court.
Thanks for letting me ask so many questions. Ms. Marshall?
Oh, just one other question. I'm just looking at your letter, and it indicates that not only will people be required to be ID'd at their first purchase, but that they'll give a wristband. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So-
I'm sorry about that.
So then you would have a mechanism for knowing if an adult of age bought a beer and gave it to an underage person. You'd be
Mhm.
able to identify if the person had a wristband on.
Exactly.
Okay, that was a concern.
Sorry.
So that's allayed. Thank you.
Ms. Stockler?
Are there any service limits, or is it just you are served until 10 o'clock?
Served till 10 o'clock, but it's one thing that we put onto the bars as responsible servers, going through serving training, making sure that they know what proper serving limits are and making sure that people are consuming responsibly. And with these events that we've found, without having it be Coors Light and some of the more domestic beers, having it be those craft beers, it costs a little bit more, and which in turn also reduces the consumption, but also it's more about the culture and the flavor of trying those things and not actually going and overly consuming.
Thank you.
Of course.
Mr. Weigel?
I'll just ask one more, and this is for Chief Nelson if he has a second. But it's been my experience that when you take groups of people 21 and above, there tends to be more issues when you put them all in one area. When you have families around, people around, it's my experience that people tend to act more responsibly. Would you agree with that, Chief? Based on your law enforcement experience?
Purely based on a public safety standpoint, mind you, looking through the lens of does it create a public safety issue, we tend to have less issues on commingling events than we do events where we actually put people in there. And I think we've noticed that as like with Blues on the Red and other things that have been a success. I will tell you philosophically, that's not my discussion, but if it got to a point where there was a public safety concern, rest assured, this board knows I would be standing here saying I had issues. And speaking with Mr. Weber based on access point concerns that we had, adjustments were made to a point where we did not have to come up and speak negatively on the event from that standpoint. So I'm comfortable if the DDA says they're going to fix this, we will have a final copy before final approval is, and our main concern is controlling that access, which means my police officers aren't the star attraction. They're there to maintain public safety, but yet it allows the DDA some chance and the families to do what they need to do. And, you know, you pay me to be concerned with public safety. So I can tell you anecdotally, since we have commingled, I mean, the largest commingling venues in Grand Forks are your Laris, the Engelstead, and everything else. And I can tell you we haven't had an issue there. So from a public safety standpoint, I do not have a concern with it.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Nelson. Anything further? Real good. Of course, this is the committee of the whole, so we're just simply making a recommendation for council consideration next week. With that said, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
So 3-1, committee of the whole makes a recommendation to move forward. I get to vote too. I'll vote in favor, please. So 4-1 recommendation to council next week. Thank you, Mr. Weber.
Thank you.
Item 2.2 has future assessment areas for various projects. This includes 24 separate distinct projects. I've spoken with members of the committee. We're prepared. Emily, if you would bring us highlights that you think we need to hear about.
Okay, Councilman Weber and Committee of the Whole members. These are all new annexations that have taken place in 2018. They become legal as of February of 2019. And we are now assessing these areas for projects that had future special assessment areas. And some of these projects will be held because they will be deferred. They're in the deferment program.
And Ms. Foss, right? Do you see any problem with us passing these as a collective?
No, I don't see any problem.
Very good. Then, unless we have a motion to pass the group and a second, any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Emily. Item 2.3, award bid number 2019-25, Area Ray Detection System and Accessories. Do we have someone prepared to present on this? Chief Nelson, is this yours? Let me pull it up here.
I believe this is fire.
Oh, it's
safety.
Chief Lorenz.
Sorry about that. What we have here is a replacement of a hazardous materials monitoring device. Annually through the North Dakota Department of Emergency Services, the city receives grant funding for the sustainment of the regional response teams. And the replacement of this monitor is funded through those grant dollars. And so this, because of the dollar amount, it went out to bids, and M&T Fire had the lowest bid for this particular piece of equipment. So we're just requesting approval for the purchase of this piece of monitoring equipment.
Very good. Any questions or comments for Chief Lorenz? Ms. Marshall moves approval. We have a second from Mr. Weigel. Any further questions or comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
2.4, 2019 JAG Assistance Grant, JAG application. Chief, you'll be speaking on this. Chief Nelson.
Yes, I will. Councilman Weber, members of the committee, this is kind of a unique opportunity for us, in keeping in mind with, Mr. Phelan's vision as far as collaboration with other entities. Annually, this board has approved us applying for JAG grants. Normally, we get approved the JAG grant, and then we split off with the county. They take 20% of the funding, we take 80%. This year, there's a piece of equipment called the TruNarc. TruNarc is a safer way for us to test a substance in the field rather than the little baggies and shaking it up and does it change color. This is a computerized system, of which there's one in town, but that is owned by the state BCI. So in speaking with the sheriff's office, we've actually have a commitment from them that if this grant is awarded, that they will take their 80% or their 20% along with our 80%, and any shortages up to $5,000 will also be matched by the state's attorney's office. So in essence, we have two county entities partnering with the city to throw money at something that we feel is vitally important, that fits in with whether you want to go back to call to action like we spoke about last week, working on the supply side of the house. It keeps me from having to, right off the bat, send something to Bismarck and maybe hearing in a couple of weeks what that substance was. We could actually house that unit here locally and be able to identify the substance. It's going to make us more effective, more efficient, and I feel it's also going to make the public safer, because we'll be pulling these illicit substances off the street. So I would ask for approval to submit for the grant.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Any questions or comments? Ms.
Just
Marshall.
a question, and then I'll move for approval. This is a really important project. So for the amount of $23,535, how many of these devices, is it one device or several devices?
That is one device.
Okay. So, high price
Thus
device.
why we don't have a lot laying around.
Right. Well, I will move approval of this.
I have a motion and a second from Mr. Weigel. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion
Thank you.
passes. Thank you again, Chief. Let's see. We're on item 2.5, plans and specifications for project number 8095, sanitary sewer and storm sewer for Block 1 of Southern Estates 12th Edition. And Mr. Kirienko.
Good evening, Councilmember Weber and members of the committee. This project is located generally north of 45th Avenue South and between South 25th Street and South Columbia Road. It's primarily storm sewer with a little bit of sanitary sewer in there as well. The developer has approached us. They wish to do this project under a three-way agreement in which the developer would hire the engineer, hire the contractor, and then the city would end up doing some inspection work, and we would invoice any engineering costs to the developer. Engineering's estimate for this project is just under $208,000, and staff is recommending approval of plans and specs.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Kirienko? Hearing none, we have a motion from Ms. Marshall, second from Ms. Dockler. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And again, Mr. Kirienko, 2.6, plans and specifications for project number 7950, shared use path on 17th Avenue South from South 20th to 25th Street. Sir.
So this project was one that we got transportation alternative funding for through the North Dakota Department of Transportation. It's on 17th Avenue South, just in front of Red River High School and extending over to South 20th Street. Plans are completed on this one, and we'll be looking to submit these to the state for the bidding process. Federal share that we got on this was $213,920, and that's just for construction activities. And then this is a project which we sent out to a consultant for design, and will likely come back for an engineering amendment for the construction services as well. Local share, we're looking at just under $290,000 for the project. And with that, staff is recommending approval of the plans and specs.
Questions or comments? We have a motion and a second. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Again, Mr. Kirienko, project update on project number 7982, 2019 Riverside Dam inspection, information only. Sir.
So every year I end up doing an inspection on the Riverside Dam, pretty much looking to make sure that everything is still where it's all supposed to be, all the riprap is in place. We haven't had any major shifts. Did that middle of last week. Doesn't appear to be any significant changes compared to previous years. In the past, the North Dakota State Water Commission would do inspections on a once every 10-year basis. The last time they did an inspection was 2009, so it would be coming up for 2019. When I contacted the State Water Commission on that one, they ended up informing me that currently our Riverside Dam is classified as a medium hazard dam. However, that was primarily classified as that because the dam was originally constructed for our water supply, making sure that we had sufficient water during the drought. The State Water Commission is changing how they're looking at their classification for dams, looking at if the dam fails, what are the downstream impacts, is our homes going to be impacted, that sort of thing. And in looking at that, they're looking to reclassify it to a low hazard dam. In reclassifying it to a low hazard dam, it would not be going through the normal inspection process. So at this point in time, they do not have an inspection scheduled for the Riverside Dam.
You made that very clear. Thanks. Any questions, comments? That's information only, but you get to stay. I saw Shane leave early and I thought, oh, with all these reports tonight, but it looks like you get to be with us. I believe this 2.8 project update on project number 7818, State Transportation Improvement Program comments. Again, this is information only.
That is correct. Last committee of the whole, I ended up talking a little bit on an update for STIP. Coming back to you with some additional information, we have provided comments to the state. We ended up sending 2 letters. One was transferring some funds from the University Avenue project over to the North 5th Street project so we could do some reconstruction over on North 5th Street, and considering that University is currently under reconstruction. We weren't going to need that funding over in that location to mill and overlay it. The other letter was in regards to the environmental document addressing the congestion at 32nd Avenue South, and the fact that we did not get that funding programmed. When we initially submitted for that, we had proposed splitting the funding on that 50-50, so they would pay 50%, the city would pay 50%. We did receive a letter back from the DOT regarding that, at which point they ended up saying that they prioritized their funding and they couldn't program it at this point in time. We are free to submit for it again in the future upcoming cycle, or if it is still a city desired project, we could move forward with it as a city only project as well.
I didn't understand that quite as clearly. Let me try to feed that back and see if I've got that right. The state is not willing to pay for a study of the 47th interchange? Is that what we're really saying here? They're not willing to pay their 50% share of that?
We had originally submitted showing a 50-50 cost split when normally it would be an 80-20. And in this case, let's see, let me grab the language from the letter. All projects submitted from across the state are reviewed for inclusion into the program. However, we are unable to accommodate all requests received. If this continues to be an important project for the city, you can certainly move forward with the environmental document as a city project, or you may continue to submit a request for funding as part of your yearly urban solicitation process.
And what we're really talking about is the potential future 47th Street interchange.
Correct.
47th Avenue interchange. And we've been talking about this for a number of years. And my understanding is we have said that this is an equal priority with the grade separation at 42nd. Is that correct?
You want to take that or?
I think we have prioritized the 47th a little bit higher because we did actually put that in some of the federal request. I do want to make a distinction though, and this is very confusing, but it's a very important distinction because an interchange is always viewed as tied to expansion of a community and opening areas for development and things like that. And it's hard not to portray it that way because it in fact does do some of that. But what we asked them to do was based on the previous studies as to how do you fix the projected congestion on 32nd Avenue South. Now that's a state highway, that's a regional system. And the studies that the MPO had done said we looked at adding lanes. We threw 6 lanes at it, we threw 8 lanes at it. It still didn't solve the problems on 32nd Avenue South. So they started thinking some outside the box alternatives, and one of the things that they came up with was essentially an interchange on 47th, peeling some of that traffic off of the 32nd corridor helped solve the 32nd Avenue problem. So what we're trying to do is solve the 32nd Avenue South problem, but we're using the alternative that was preliminarily investigated, which is an interchange. So again, its purpose for what we're looking for really is to solve the 32nd Avenue South projected problem, but it will open up growth in the meantime in doing that. So, but again, it's an important distinction. We're not asking for an interchange, again, for purposes of growth. We're trying to solve a projected problem on 32nd Avenue South. Again, we have the traffic volumes, the safety issues, you know, the number of crashes and things that are going on 32nd because of all the cross traffic. So again, I just wanted to clarify that. That's an important distinction as to why we're looking at that particular project.
So the intention is to solve a problem at 32nd, but the proposed solution to that problem is a new interchange with the potential likelihood of growth or sprawl. I mean, we could use both words. But the point tonight is that our request to have the state pay for half of a study of that, they've said they're not going to pay for their half of the study. They're telling us we can go ahead and study it if we want to pay for the study, but they don't have money to pay for the study. Is that correct?
They have not prioritized that study. I would be very concerned about setting a precedence where we start paying for studies on 32nd Avenue South, Gateway Drive, Washington. You know, those are all the same state highway system type roads that we're talking about here. And so, you know, I think it's very important that the state have skin in the game, so to speak, as to how to solve their problems on their system.
We start picking up that tab, they might expect us to do that all the time in the future. Oh.
Yeah, there's permutations to not having skin in the game. Yeah.
Okay. One other question, I think, directly related to this. What is our current, I mean, I've been through lots of strategic visioning sessions, et cetera, where we've discussed what the priorities are, but I can't, off the top of my head, pull exactly what the list is and in what order they are. Can you tell us what our top 3, maybe 5 current infrastructure priorities are? Is that something you'd have on the top of your head?
No. But let me explain the no.
But our top 2 have been 42nd and 47th, is that correct?
Yeah, the problem that we have is we have a financially constrained budget that we bring in with the 6-year CIP. Lots of maintenance projects, lots of those types of projects in there. And the problem that we always run into, the catch-22, is these very, very large projects, which primarily there's 3 of them. There's an interchange, there's an underpass, and there's a bridge. And none of those can fit within our financial constraints because there's not enough money to handle any one of them. So that's one of the reasons I think they don't show up on the prioritization list because I think the inference is that you're prioritizing a project to which you have the financial wherewithal to do, right? If you don't have the financial wherewithal to do it, you know, kind of how do you prioritize it? But I think that's another discussion that we need to have with the city council coming up. Is that I'm very concerned on some of the timing of what's going on in here, but I don't want to get into that tonight. But our growth may have already be interfering with the 47th Avenue concept. So that's just me and a forethought. But we need to be moving ahead on one of those projects anyway, because they've been kind of on the books for the last 20 years or more. And but we're not making progress really on any of them.
Very good. My concern is that if we keep saying everything's the top priority, then we don't have a top priority, and then we get a response from the state saying, you know, we're not going to pay for our half because you haven't identified it as a priority. I've asked far too many questions. Mr. Weigel.
Mr. Phelan, is there a way that you could, for the next committee meeting that we have, could you bring this discussion item up, do a little research, and then we can hash it out and during that meeting and come up with a formal list 1 through 3,000 if we want of what our most important projects are and designate one straight from the council?
Well, before he answers that, let me jump in if I may. I think we can have some of that discussion right now and help provide further direction. What is 47th Avenue a top priority for this body or not? Where is it in comparison to the grade separation at 42nd, for instance? Do we want to continue having 3 top priorities? I think this is not a conversation we're going to solve tonight, but we could perhaps have a conversation to give greater direction for staff to move forward in the future.
I guess I would say the priority from the people in my ward is the 42nd Street underpass or overpass, whatever you want to build there, due to the fact that there's much more rail traffic than I think we've probably ever seen in quite some time, due to the fact that it's an emergency personnel response issue. When there is a train blocking, whether it's fire trucks, ambulance, or whoever is trying to get through. So to me, that'd be my priority. Now, others may agree or disagree, but I think that's something that we need to look at and work with the federal government and the state legislature to see if we can get some funding for.
Very good. And actually, Mr. Walker, we'll just have everyone come up to the mic. Mr. Walker, I heard something last week at an MPO meeting downstairs where we were discussing the interchange at 5th and Gateway with the mill spur. And I heard of a technology that I've been trying to ask the right question for a few years, and I don't know if it's brand new technology or what the case is, and maybe I just haven't been asking the question right. I think it was called Train Info or Trainfo, something like that. And if I understood correctly, it would give motorists advanced notice of there's going to be a train at this intersection. It can be anticipated at such and such a time and will last approximately this long. So as a motorist, I can decide, I'll go ahead there, or I have time to make a decision for an alternate route. And am I describing the technology accurately at all?
That's correct. That's what I understood as well. I'm not familiar with the technology, but I was at the same meeting as you where it was described. And what I understand is that there are sensors that could be installed that would detect a train, and then there would be the need for electronic billboards, if you will, placed at certain locations that would display when a train is at a crossing and when to expect it.
Right, and part of that discussion was, whoa, these things aren't cheap. I think one sign was $30,000, a larger sign was maybe as much as $100,000. But a few of these signs, compared to the potential, maybe this is potentially a $40 million project we're approaching now for the grade separation at 42nd. Those signs, it feels to me, would give me the information I need as a motorist to. We have alternate routes around that intersection. If I only knew that there was a train coming, I'd turn at Columbia or the interstate. So this is one of the priorities. 47th Avenue, we've been including that for years now, but in this kind of co-equal status. Are there any other projects that we would ask staff to bring forward in a discussion where we maybe give clearer direction about our priorities on infrastructure? Mr. Phelan, did you have something to add?
Mr. Weber, I agree with Al. I think he described three large regional projects: the underpass at 42nd, the two bridges, Merrifield and the Intercity Bridge, and then finally the 47th Avenue interchange that really is to help with 32nd Avenue South and has some tangential benefits. Those are three regional projects, and in the one category we have two projects, which even makes it more challenging. I think we need to start prioritizing one, because I think we're going to have one opportunity to fund a major project at the next North Dakota legislative session. And so this time next year, we should be focused on what our one ask is going to be. The water treatment plant will be out of the way for funding, and for whatever reason, when you go to the state, it's as though they don't want to deliver more than one large capital project to a community like Grand Forks. So I think with that project out of the way, I think our focus should be on and I think it's going to be a transportation project, what one of these four projects in these three areas is our most pressing need. And they all have, there's good arguments on all of them, and there's challenging arguments. So I think we should have that discussion as we look towards next year. And we can help you with that. I don't know if next week, but like Al was talking about, number one, on the 47th, we're growing to that point. By the time we get a study and we get all these things, there's only so much we can do to stop development in and around that corridor. Otherwise, we're going to run out of areas to develop by the time we even get there. We'll have to live too long to get to that point. That's our concern at this point. And we're going to be growing in areas we ought not grow, but we're preserving all this land and in these corridors at this sort of thing. It's hard to push time on some of these things. And we know on 42nd, we have a lot of partners that would be eager to partner with us on it. Maybe there's some alternative technologies. The bridges, what I hear on the Merrifield Bridge, both counties, I was at the meeting, they're probably reluctant soldiers on wanting to move that project forward. I'd have to put that in that category. And the Intercity Bridge, we don't have to say much more than that. There's pros and cons, and based on where that's at. So with all that, we could kind of do some pros and cons, costs, other mitigating factors, bring that back as part of a strategic discussion. But we do press on you that if we're going to make one thing happen, and I think we have a legislative group that's been very effective for Grand Forks, but I think we need to help them be effective by pointing to that one project that's really the most beneficial for our community.
I'm actually more interested in some projects that perhaps have a lower bill, maybe a higher impact, like moving the mill spur out so that we could reclaim a lot of land for potential development, infill development here in town. But that's part of a larger discussion. As Mr. Vian and I have often said as co-chairs of the Legislative Committee, it's during the interim that you want to be working on these things and positioning yourself for the next session. Ms. Marshall, you know that from your years in Bismarck. So it doesn't have to be next week, but I think that this is an important discussion for us to have sometime soon. Are there other projects that we would want to have considered, or are we starting to muddy the waters at that point?
I think those are the projects. The rest of them, we don't want to get you into the weeds. We should be able to prioritize the rest of those transportation type projects without getting you too much fully engaged. But these are the big ones that are outside of our scope to prioritize. And it's just hard for us without some political leadership to focus our energies. We're really good at that, but we're not sometimes good at picking the political winner. And that we really need you to do that. But we need to help you too to do the pros and cons and all the things that you need, so you can make the most strategic choice of all those projects. So we'll do that at a near-term meeting and start engaging in that discussion.
Very good. Ms. Marshall, please.
Yes, just if it would be helpful to have an estimated cost of each of the projects, and of course the 42nd Street project isn't on these charts attached to our plan or our report, and it would be a factor that I'd want to see some data on as well.
Yep. I think the other thing, Mr. Weber and Ms. Marshall, these projects are at different levels of their study too. So as I recall, like Merrifield was further than an intercity bridge. I think 42nd grade separation is further along than the 47th out of an interchange from a study perspective. But then you get concerned that the studies get stale, I think you guys call them. And so you got to seize the moment at some point. You just can't malinger around on some of these things. So we'll kind of detail what further effort is needed, how much money is going to be invested, can we get a federal state cost share, all those things. So we'll put together all those kinds of things so you got a snapshot of all those projects.
Very good. As you say, 42nd, we had some very specific plans. We saw drawings of what it could actually look like. That looked like it was altered for a while with some possible opportunity with Ray Richards Golf Course, but now we're back to the same format we had. That one isn't requiring it seems the same level of study as some of the other projects, because that's far enough along. Mr. Grasser?
Interesting question. And again, I'll dance the answer maybe a little bit. When Ray Richards was a golf course, we took that, we had a preferred alternative. We took it all the way through the environmental analysis. We got caught in a catch-22 where the state said, well, we can't approve the environmental because you don't have it on your state transportation plan. And by the way, you can't get it on the transportation plan because it costs too much. We don't have the money to do it. Kind of inferring unless you pay for it locally. Okay. Fast forward a little bit more now, we probably will want to go back and refine a study, because now that, oops, I got to catch myself. Ray Richards is back to being a golf course now, isn't it? I was going to say when that came off that list, we had some additional alternatives, but now it's gone back. So I guess we haven't moved. Now that I think about it, sorry about that,
That's
Mr.
all right.
Chairman,
We're kind of back
City
to where
Council.
we had,
Caught myself.
And we'd moved pretty far along on studying that, and we're
Yes.
back to the same conditions when we had studied that. So we know a fair bit about that project.
And we had a pretty good, we went in depth on some of the cost analysis, because if you remember right, we actually tried to apply for, considered applying for Tiger Grant money at one point in time. But that takes a lot of
This is
upfront money
federal
to make
dollars.
that. Federal
Right.
dollars, special program. So, yes, 42nd is farther along than any of the other ones.
And my apologies for asking this kind of question, but are you reading anything in the tea leaves in terms of the state's response to 47th Avenue? Are they sending us any signal of their preferences, or are they just waiting for us to give them a preference? Tea leaf question?
Yeah, I think that's a question of matters of opinion that I probably don't want to really shoot out there right now. I don't know that I know the answer for sure.
Very good. So, Mr. Phelan, I was trying to muddy the waters and bring in 16 other projects. You're asking us to really take a look at the 3 top projects and give clear direction on a single priority as we prepare for the 2021 legislative session. Is that correct?
That is correct. 3 categories, 4 projects. 2 bridges.
and hopefully, it doesn't have to be next week, but sometime soon, that'll be on the agenda.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
good.
We'll work together and bring something back.
This was information only. I've been asking lots of questions. Anything further for Mr. Kirienko? Very good. All right. Thank you, sir. Now, Mr. Walker, it's your turn. Item number 2.9, emergency repairs on lift station number 22 manhole, also information only. Mr. Walker.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Weber and members of the committee. So lift station 22 is located on North 36th Street, north of the Simplot facility. And that station primarily serves the J.R. Simplot and the Contaluna Foods facility. We found some time ago that the manhole right outside of that station was severely deteriorated, that the interior of the manhole, the concrete was very soft and it was flaking off. And so we knew that it was deteriorating because of hydrogen sulfide attacks. So we knew that we needed to either line that manhole or coat that manhole before the deterioration spread so far that the manhole would fail. And so we also knew that we needed to do something at a point in time when Simplot either reduced their flows or stopped their flows. Simplot generates about 1/3 of the wastewater flow from the entire city. So the flow going through that manhole was pretty significant. And so Simplot facility shuts down very rarely. And recently we were informed that they were planning a 2-day shutdown. So we kind of scrambled and put together a plan to fix that manhole. We have known about a product that a contractor installs where he puts in a fiberglass reinforced PVC liner inside of manholes and lift stations. And he was actually working on a lift station liner in our villa. So we worked with him to give us a quote as to what it would cost to put that manhole liner in. And he gave us a quote and indicated that he could do it during the 2-day shutdown period that Simplot was planning. And so we've looked at other possibilities of taking care of that manhole. We looked at actually replacing it, and the cost to do so would have been between $45,000 and $50,000, and it would have been pretty significant because the manhole was 26 feet deep, would have required quite a large hole, would have taken out a significant portion of the street and the adjacent driveway to the lift station. And we also looked at coating it with a spray-on type of a coating that we bid in 2017. We didn't pursue that project because the cost of that was $64,000. So the contractor that we worked with for the PVC fiberglass liner gave us a quote of $21,532.18 to do that work. So because of the short time we had available, because we weren't aware of any other company that did that type of lining work, and because the quote that we received from this company was significantly less than other options we looked at, and finally because we knew that we needed to do something to stop that corrosion, we accepted that quote from this contractor and proceeded with the work. The work was actually done last week, and with the assistance of the wastewater staff, a company called CIP Construction Technology Incorporated from Kalispell, Montana, completed that liner. So we want to let you know that we went ahead with this work. We did it as a sole source and an emergency repair. So just wanted to inform you that no action necessary.
Short story, that you had good news for us.
It worked well.
It sounds good. Very good. That's information only. Next item, again, Mr. Walker, 2.10, project update for project number 8096, swale improvements adjacent to Breezy Hills Cove and between Rolling Hills Circle and Gentle Hills Circle. Again, this is information only. Mr. Walker.
So this area is in the Sunbeam Addition, and the Sunbeam Addition is a single-family residential area adjacent to the Red River and northward of 47th Avenue South. And so in this particular area, the backyard drainage and I should say the storm sewer drainage is set up where water flows through backyard swales, as opposed to a storm sewer system of pipes and manholes that you would normally see in other parts of the city. In this particular area, the front lots of each of those residential lots drains into the street. Water that falls into the street then drains into catch basins. Catch basins take it and put it into a pipe, drain it into a swale or ditch that is in the backyard of these residents. That stormwater then travels down that swale. Sometimes it passes underneath a roadway or a street through another small culvert, goes into another swale, eventually finds its way into a storm sewer that parallels the flood protection levee, and then eventually outfalls into the Red River. So the swales were constructed when the property was originally developed in the mid-70s, and the purpose of the swales were twofold. It was a way of putting in a storm sewer system that was less expensive than the conventional storm sewer pipes and manholes, and the dirt that was excavated was placed on the lots, building them to a higher elevation to make them less able to be flooded from the Red River. The city's policy up to this point has been that the city staff takes care of the catch basins and the manholes and the pipes, but the backyard swales, maintaining those, have been the responsibility of the property owners. It's a similar policy that we have in backyard drainage. The rear of most lots will drain to a low spot in the back where it's eventually conveyed either to the street or to a manhole or catch basin that's in the backyards. We've taken that approach just because the maintenance of the swales in the backyards can be rather time consuming if you end up with some properties that are more meticulous than others. And our stormwater department is a department of 3, taking care of the storm sewer in the entire city. So on numerous, I should say that in numerous other areas, the neighborhoods have kind of banded together, got together and developed, worked together to clean their swales, and often they have put in a concrete invert at the bottom of their swales. The concrete invert is beneficial because as sediment and debris and vegetation accumulates in the concrete invert, a person can just go in there and scrape it off, pick it out of there, and you have reestablished your grade. With the grass swales, without the concrete invert, sediment can build up, vegetation can occur, and eventually things get built up, and the grade is too high, and it's blocking drainage for the downstream user. So we've worked with other neighborhoods, giving them advice as to how to proceed with a project. They've hired a contractor themselves. Some of them have actually done the work themselves, but we've also surveyed the backyards, providing the homeowners with line and grade and surveys. However, for the area that we're talking about here, they've tried to organize their neighborhood, but they haven't been successful. And we're of the opinion that if the city doesn't step in to help out, that it probably just won't get done. There are some property owners who have done a very fine job of maintaining the grade in their swales. There are others who have probably done very little since the swales were originally constructed in the 70s. There's actually one property that has a very large tree growing right in the middle of the swale, and the tree is 4 to 5 feet in diameter. It's huge. It's going to take quite a bit of effort to get that out. So the city has begun working on a project that would remove trees that are in conflict, remove vegetation that's in conflict, remove some of the built-up sediment, and proceed with a project. Our intent would be also to construct a concrete invert so that we don't have to come back and do a project like this years down the road. Our intent in moving forward is to have a neighborhood meeting and discuss this with hopefully more of the neighbors. To this point, we've met with Councilman Marshall and I have met with some of the neighbors who have had problems with the drainage. There are people out there that really want to get the drainage corrected. I fear that there may be others who would object to the project, and they would object to the project for just a number of reasons. The work has to be done in their backyard, so as we have equipment and workmen working back there, it can be objectionable to some people. Also, to gain access to the backyard swales, there's going to have to be, at some point in time, we're going to have to pass in between houses with equipment and workmen to get back there to the access to the swales. And as we do this work, because the swales are somewhat confined and they're frequently wet with soft soils, we're going to have to use smaller equipment. And to get the material out there means that you're going to have to travel back and forth numerous times between houses and get the material out, as well as, if we construct a concrete invert, bringing in concrete and formwork and that type of thing. Working with small equipment in confined locations like this, we expect that the cost would be relatively expensive as compared to doing a similar work out in a wide open right-of-way. We think that there's a possibility that some folks may object to removal of trees if they become attached to them. There may be others that would object to removal of the thick vegetation because it provides some screening and some privacy for them. We also know that there may be a differing of opinion as to how the benefits should be distributed. There are some property owners who need a lot of work on their property, and there are others who don't need much because they've maintained it. So how we eventually distribute the benefits could be debated. Some may object to the concrete invert. Some might prefer to have a grass invert. I've explained the advantages of a concrete invert, but the disadvantage of the concrete invert is that it can be relatively expensive. So, based on a very preliminary look at this, we're estimating that the project cost of this nature, to put in the concrete invert, do all the work of cleaning and removing of the vegetation and trees and obstructions, would be around $350,000 to $400,000. With a special assessment markup, that cost would be $430,000 to $500,000. So we know that there is a desire for some property owners to do something now. We've been working with the property owners for like the last couple of years, encouraging them to do something on their own. But now it's to the point where the city's decided, okay, we have to step in. There is a desire from some that we get the project done this year. However, we know that the contractors who would normally do this type of work have got their schedule pretty well filled up. So probably the best we can do would be to bid a project this fall for construction. Maybe do some of the work this fall, but the majority of it next summer. So our intent is to move forward with a public input meeting where we can talk with some of these property owners, explain to them what we're proposing, and then create a special assessment district at a future meeting, followed by bidding a project. But this information that I'm providing to you now is, I'm not looking again for any type of action, but I just wanted to let you know. You may get contacted by people that are saying that the city should pay for the whole thing because it's a storm sewer. You may get contacted by some people who are very much in favor of the project, others that are against it. So just wanted to let you know.
It's a lot of work keeping a city functioning and clean, isn't it?
It is.
And a seemingly simple problem has layers of complexity on it. Yeah. Ms. Marshall, this is in your ward. Any comments?
Yes, I just wanted to thank Mr. Walker for this very detailed explanation of a very, very complex project. As he noted, it's something that he and I have been talking with the neighbors about for almost 2 years, and have had meetings with them, have actually walked the swale and looked at the trees and the other obstacles along the way. And I think we're at a point where doing nothing is not an option, but it also is a project that is complex enough that I think that the right approach is the one that we're taking, and that's to have a public meeting. We're targeting maybe in a couple weeks, possibly the 27th, but I think at this point we don't have a location nailed down, so please hold for further details on that public meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Marshall. And so next item, 2.11, preliminary engineering reimbursement agreement for project number 7978, reconstruction of Washington Street underpass. This is at 5th Avenue South to 1st Avenue North. And Mr. Walker?
Yes, so this is a North Dakota DOT-led project, and the project is proposed to reconstruct the railroad underpass on Washington Street. Including in that would be reconstruction of the roadway from 5th Avenue South to 1st Avenue North. And the project, if it proceeded, would utilize up to about $14.2 million of federal funding. So the DOT is proceeding with preliminary engineering work, and before they proceed with that, utilizing federal money, they need a commitment from us indicating that we're in agreement with proceeding with the project. And if we decide that we wanted to terminate the project or change the scope of the project significantly, they want us to sign an agreement that says we would reimburse them for the money that they have spent so far on the preliminary engineering. This is kind of a similar agreement that we signed a couple of times with the DOT as they've started a project. They basically are just looking for our commitment on this. So right now the DOT has hired a consultant to take core samples out of the concrete. There's a concern that the concrete in the structure is weakening. We've wondered as to what the life expectancy of the bridge is, and they'll be able to analyze that. My understanding is that based upon the deterioration as they see it, if they feel that the structure has significant more life, they may delay the project, but right now it's scheduled to be constructed in 2022. Now that schedule may change depending upon what they find out, but right now, they're just intending to go ahead with the preliminary engineering work. So the total project, as it's currently estimated, is about $17.6 million. The city's share in that would be about 10%, or about $1.76 million. So with that, staff's recommendation is to proceed or to approve the agreement with the North Dakota Department of Transportation for this project.
And Mr. Walker, if I may, we've been in meetings together where you've heard me discuss the possibility of taking advantage of this project to increase accessibility between the university and downtown. We have groups looking at doing that right now, whether that would be a pedestrian bike path that would give a bridge over Washington, or even bus rapid transit, something along those lines. And what I'm understanding from the staff report tonight and your recommendation, you're recommending that we move forward with just the straight bones reconstruction of that bridge, and to not include any of those other possibilities at this time? Or did I misunderstand that?
No, what we're looking at right now is the very beginning of the design of this project. If the city wishes to do something like that, there's an opportunity that we could ask the DOT to look at that. Now, I would suspect that the DOT, if they were to permit that they would require that we be responsible for a second structure, that we also look at how we're going to get the roadway to that crossing, because you're talking about having a secondary bridge across Washington Street that would connect up with Dyke. But I think at this stage of the game, that is something that could be considered as part of this project, but I think that the city really needs to look at what will it take and what will the costs be to the city to accommodate that, because there's going to need to be property acquisition to make that connection from Dyke to the crossing. So there's some things I think that we need to look at before we we make that request.
It's been a few years now, but that had been studied at one point, and including some drawings and some very preliminary ideas. Is it possible for me to make a second request in terms of infrastructure, future infrastructure projects, and to have that put together as some sort of proposal for us to consider, moving beyond just the reconstruction of the bridge?
We could look at some preliminary layouts as to how we would accomplish that, yeah.
Very good. This is not information only. You are asking for a vote from this committee. So we're being asked to approve the preliminary engineering reimbursement agreement with the NDOT for city project number 7978. Any further questions or comments? Ms. Marshall?
I would move approval.
We have a motion to approve, second from Ms. Dockler. Anything further? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And again, Mr. Walker, let's see, we're on item number 212, 2.12, amendment number 1 to engineering services agreement for project number 8028, mill and overlay of University Avenue, North 3rd Street to State Street. Sir.
So this is a project we're utilizing federal monies through the North Dakota Department of Transportation. Up to $2.2 million would be available for this project. And so it includes milling and overlaying University Avenue, but it also includes upgrading all of the handicap ramps so that they are ADA compliant. Previously, you've approved an engineering agreement with the firm of CPS to do the preliminary engineering work. That was different surveys and a number of other things that was required by the North Dakota DOT in order to use federal funding for this project. We are to the point now where we need to proceed with design engineering on this project, which is the intent of this amendment number 1, to add that work to CPS's contract. The project is currently proposed, is scheduled to be bid in February of 2020 and be constructed during the 2020 construction season. The original agreement was for just a little over $89,000, and this proposed amendment would be for $209,308. And it is the intent of this work would be to develop a set of plans and specifications and bidding documents and all the bid quantities and things that are necessary to submit to the DOT for them to acquire a bid on the project. It is worth noting that the North Dakota DOT recently changed their policy regarding when we put in handicap ramps and sidewalks. If there are sidewalks and handicap ramps that need to be replaced under the project, they require that a temporary easement be acquired from the adjacent property owner. So for this project, we estimate there's going to be about 60 different temporary easements we'll need to acquire, getting all of the necessary paperwork as directed by the North Dakota DOT. And there's about $75,000 of cost included in this amendment to take care of that. So it's a pretty significant effort to acquire all those temporary easements, but it's a requirement. Our estimate of the project costs to date is total. We believe that the cost to be about $2.65 million, with the federal share being just a bit under $1.9 million, and the city's share being about $763,000. Staff's recommendation is to approve amendment number 1 with CPS for design engineering services in the amount of $209,308.
Move approval. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Which brings us to item 2.13, Public Work Operations Street Division Salt for Ice Control bid number 2019-27, 2019- fiscal year 2020 winter season. Ms. Evans.
Good evening, Councilmember Weber and members of the committee. This is an annual item that we do go out to bid for rock salt for ice control operations, this time for the 2019-20 season. And the city received 2 bids in regards to rock salt, and we've attached, along with the staff report, the bid tabulation and the budget in reference to that. And with that, staff requests approval of the bid for rock salt for ice control and to NSC Minerals of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, in the amount of $67,732.
Very good, and my apologies, I didn't have my microphone on earlier. This is item 2.13 on the agenda. Ms. Amundsen, I think you described the project very well. Looking for any questions or comments? Hearing none, just approval for the bid then. We have a motion from Ms. Marshall, second from Mr. Weigel. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Was that an approval, Ms. Mock?
Yes.
Yes, of course, very good. So we have an approval for item 2.13. Item 2.14, wastewater WWTP parts purchase for repair to MBF. Hello.
Good evening.
If you'd help us through those acronyms.
My acronym, sorry.
Thanks.
So for the wastewater treatment plant, they were requesting to purchase parts for the MBF, and that's the micro bubble flotation tanks.
Yes. Okay.
It's part of the clarification, part of the process right before it goes to disinfection. So just because the parts were $14,000, a little over $14,000, we'd ask for your approval tonight. That's directly from the manufacturer, something that you can't, or it's difficult to bid those parts and be able to place them in an existing piece of equipment like that.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Parvey. Any comments or questions? We have a motion from Ms. Marshall, a second from Ms. Dockler. Anything further? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. And brings us to item 2.15, disposition of public transportation vehicles. Mr. Bergman, please.
Councilman Weber and the members of the committee, what this is we are disposing of 5 of our vehicles that have had replacements. We've had a total of 8 new vehicles that we've brought on board this last year. And so 5 of these, we are now outside their limits for both mileage and life cycle on it. So we're asking to put these up for sale in gov deals so we can get rid of them.
Comments or questions? We have a motion from Mr. Weigel, second from Ms. Marshall. Anything further? Hearing no further comments or questions, all in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And Dale, we've got you again, Mr. Bergman. Item 2.16, public transit fare agreement for UND faculty and staff.
Councilman Weber and members of the committee, again, this is a start of us working with the university a little bit more. We've had an agreement with the student government, with the students getting their tickets when they slide their fare card through or their ID card through. We actually send a bill to the UND student government for 75 cents for the student fees on there. Now the university would like us to also have that same option that the faculty can ride our buses. It looks like it's free, but it's actually not. They slide their fare card or their ID card through the fare box. It registers them as a faculty, and then we bill back to the university $1.30 per ride. This is equal to the same fare as a 10-ride card would normally cost, and that's why we have it like this instead of the cash fare of $1.50. So we're asking approval to go ahead and move forward. We've had discussions with Mr. Pieper from the university, and they are in favor of doing this.
And the fiscal impact for the city on this? It's neutral?
It's neutral, yes.
Except additional.
We gain
riders.
actually more money for it.
Very good. Any comments or questions? Otherwise, looking for a motion. Mr. Weigel moves. Ms. Marshall seconds. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approves. Any other business this evening? Any other business? Hearing none, we have no announcements. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Ms. Dockery moves, Ms. Marshall seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you for being with us tonight. This meeting has been brought to you in part by
Let Grand Forks International Airport help you start your next vacation off on the right foot. Grand Forks International Airport offers flights to the sunny destinations of Orlando, Las Vegas, and Phoenix on Allegiant, and connections anywhere in the world through Minneapolis-St. Paul on Delta. Forget the hassle of long drives, parking nightmares, and stressful check-ins. The convenience of flying locally means less headaches and more time for you. Grand Forks International Airport. Your airport. Simply grand.
Know what's in this box? Well, in case your crystal ball is broken, here's a hint. Safe, reliable energy, for starters, but there's also a commitment to this community. See, at Excel Energy, this is our hometown. So we're not just about making a living here, we're about living here. Oh, I wish I had wings.
In our community, we're always delivering. Excel Energy, responsible by nature.
Grand Forks. On Saturday, August 17th, WWE Live heats up with a massive main event.
We have entered a new era for the Universal title. The age of Rollins is here.
As Seth Rollins collides with Baron Corbin in a no-holds-barred match for the Universal Championship. Plus, see Ricochet take on The Miz and Cesaro in a triple threat match for the United States Championship. And don't miss Alexa Bliss. It's WWE Live on Saturday, August 17th. Tickets are available.